I don't know what we can talk about in this nation without talking about white superiority, honestly.
Who defines the meaning of God also defines the relationship between economy and God.
African Americans spent $1.3 trillion last year, making us the 16th wealthiest nation in the world. Why have we not turned those riches into wealth to develop our community?
Peace, peace, peace. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of HAPI Talks. I'm your host, Chike Grant, and I'm glad to be back here. It's been a little while since I've been on the platform. Gotta give a shout out to Sister Felicia for holding it down for such a long time. We have a great program here tonight. Dr. Chika Akua and Professor Anthony Browder talking about the power of the African mind and why is that so important and the significance of that. But before we get started, we just want to give a shout out to everyone in the audience. Just quickly tell us, where you're at, where you're from. Just let us know you're there. We'll take a couple minutes, let people come into the building. Show's pretty much starting prompt today, so we're gonna wait a little while. Got Sister Rashamela Kumbu, Peach and Must Love. Thank you, sister. Big happy supporter, DM, Hotep, happy family, big supporter, Jose Cruz, another one, Michelle Ward, these are all the people, Dennis Taylor, big supporters. Drastic BCF, hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Hotep family, Uncle Josaneb, definitely hoping I'm saying that correctly. Tamika Murphy, definitely Michelle Jewell. Well, shout out to you. We were in your state this past weekend in Orlando. Got to get with you, talk to you about some things in your state of Florida. So yeah, definitely want to get an idea where people are from, because one of the things that we're about to start doing is taking these tours, theatrical tours. COVID did not allow us to move around the way we wanted to. So everything we did up until this point has been the online or virtual releases. But the family interaction, the family gatherings is important for us as African people. And we definitely want to get back into that. With that being said, if you haven't had an opportunity to get your copy of HAPI, please do. Like we said, we will also be possibly in your city, but if not, you can always go to the website, www.hapifilm.com. That's HAPIFILM. We also want to just talk about people just coming to these screenings. If you have organizations and groups that would like to host a screening, please get at us, hapifilm.com at gmail. hapifilm@gmail.com. Very important. With that being said, without any further ado, we want to bring in our two guests for the evening, Dr. Chika Akua and Professor Anthony Browder.
Hotep, brother Taki, how you doing?
Hotep, my brother. Hotep, how's everything?
All is well.
We're good.
Good. Well, this show came about because of the great presentations you brothers did with, and you got to help me with this, the Reverend
Truth and Transformation.
Truth and Transformation. Yes, very powerful presentations. Both presented. And definitely want to get more into that discussion, talking about the power of the African mind. There's so much you guys laid out in that. Now, thank you. I'm humbled that you guys are coming here tonight to share with the family. Dr. Chika Akua, we're going to start with you. Just tell us briefly a little bit about yourself, if you can.
Sure. I feel like I'm a product of the African-centered education movement of the late 1980s and early 90s. That was when I was in undergraduate school at Hampton University. And that was when I came across the work of Brother Tony Browder. I was raised by two strong Black parents who instilled Black pride in us. And it was a beautiful thing. I'm the youngest of 5 children, but still you have to deal with your surroundings and the reality, of what it means to be Black in America and in the world. And coming into that consciousness as an undergraduate student at Hampton University was really powerful for me. That's when I went through a traditional African rites of passage. The elder brothers gave me the name Chika, which means power of God. But coming in contact with Tony's books helped me to understand who I am, whose I am, where I come from, and where I'm going. And he made it so clear through the books that it led me on the path that I'm on now. I was an education major, so I was studying to become a teacher. And I soon and very quickly found out that what I was learning was not going to help me, and it was not going to help the students that I was training to teach. So I needed to tap into another body of knowledge that would help me to empower the students that I would be in front of. And so being a product of the African-centered education movement, I came in contact with not only Tony's work, but Asa Hilliard, Marimba Ani, Malefi Asante, Malana Karenga, Charles Finch, all of the great African scholars, Runoko Rashidi, many of the people that you've had on HAPI Talks in the past, deeply influenced the work that I do. And I made a promise to many of those elders, and it was very simply this, that we will continue what you have begun. So much of the work that I do in terms of crafting and creating African-centered curriculum resources for students, for parents, and for teachers and so forth comes out of that experience of having been taught by master teachers. So in addition to that, I'm also a professor at Clark Atlanta University in the Department of Educational Leadership. Love serving there and working with the students there and bringing some of this knowledge to them as well, because what I found is that they're hungry for this knowledge as well. As a matter of fact, a number of my students have told me that many of the lessons that I've taught about our history and our culture, being grounded in African-centered understandings, was the primary reason why they came to an HBCU. So I've never been in front of an audience. I've spoken to thousands of young people and adults over the years, but I've never been in front of an audience that was not hungry for this kind of information. And so that's what continues to fuel me and drive me to do the work that I do.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. That's an amazing background, and it talks to a lot of what we do here at HAPI Talks on HAPI, in that sense, just staying connected or being grounded to our roots, you know, our elders and our ancestors. Honored again to have you, our brothers, on the platform. Definitely have a lot of love and respect and admiration for Professor Browder and yourself, and just kind of keep this thing in HAPI going and making sure that right information is getting disseminated to the people, and people that have the information, like you brothers here, are speaking on the things that you've known and you experienced. With that being said, family, just please take this opportunity to like and share this video. Extremely important. Also, leave a comment. It's important that we like and share and get this information out. We're limited in terms of the algorithms and how it works out, but you leave a comment. More times than not, I always like to respond to all the comments that are left. Definitely want to like it and share it as well. Thank you. So, Dr. Akua, please speak to the power of the African mind and the sense of the contribution to the field of science.
Sure. In terms of the power of the African mind, I think it's important that our listeners understand that there are several different dimensions of reality, but each of those dimensions are mediated by our consciousness. Consciousness meaning our awareness, our expanded awareness of problems and possibilities. So when we talk about African sacred science, when we talk about the secrets of African sacred science, when I say African, I'm talking about that which emanated out of the hearts, minds, spirits, and souls of African people. Sacred means to be sanctified, set apart, or holy. And science comes from the Latin word scientia, meaning to know. So you might say, well, to know what? Whatever it is that you want to know. Our ancestors had a method towards finding out whatever you wanted to know. And that method that they used is what we today would call science. But in ancient times, they actually had another word for that. And I'll get to that in just a second in terms of what that word was in the ancient language. As a matter of fact, Professor Kaba Kamene tells us that that word is tep heseb, and it means an accurate reckoning using a correct method. Again, an accurate reckoning using a correct method. And so they documented the methods that they would use to solve problems. I think one of the challenges that we face today is that there's certainly no lack of problems that we face, but the method that we use oftentimes is not scientifically based in our traditions. And we oftentimes are leaning on and dependent on other traditions in the absence of the knowledge of our own traditions. And another thing to take into consideration is that in the Western world, science and spirituality have been separated. But that separation doesn't exist in traditional African science or in African sacred science. And so I'm reminded on my first trip to Kemet, I was blessed to be able to go with Brother Tony. And on the way back, he confided in me. He said, others have discovered our ancient sacred science, and they use it to empower themselves and oppress others. And that signaled to me that I needed to, first of all, recognize that I had been completely miseducated in science, because prior to that, I really wasn't interested in science too much. But it made me go back and look at it again. It made me go and read Charles Finch's book, The Star of Deep Beginnings, The African Genesis of Science and Technology, and really dig deep into what science was for us and to us. And what I found was that, how could I say I don't like science or I don't want to study science? I found out I am science. We all are science, right? And so it's very, very important that we understand that these different levels of awareness are mediated by our consciousness. And if our consciousness is low and it's not grounded in our values, then we can't reach the higher levels that will allow us to solve the very challenges and problems that we're facing today as a people. Oh, you're on mute, brother.
Thank you for that, Professor Browder. I always like to mute my mic when people are talking, because let them get the floor, let them talk exclusively. I don't want to have any background noise interrupting anything you brothers are saying. But with that being said, Professor Browder, in the sense of Nile Valley contributions to civilization, can you touch briefly on some of the contributions the brothers and sisters along the Nile made to science?
Well, I think one of the first things that we have to realize is that these Africans were in tune with nature. And nature is the showcase of science. Everything that there is to know is expressed in nature. So the more you can center yourself in your environment, the more you can attune yourself to the sun, the rising and setting of the sun, the transitions of the moon, the stars, the heavens, the more you can attune yourself with that which you are a part of, the more you begin to awaken the sleeping giant within you. So what we see in the Nile Valley, and Kemet is just the crown and the jewel of the Nile Valley, but what we should begin to look at more is the entire length of the Nile Valley. There are cultures and traditions which we know nothing about that is still waiting to be discovered in the lower portion or the upper portion of the Nile Valley up south. And the reason why we know nothing about it is because white folk know that there's no possibility the white folk were down there, so they're not digging there. And as a result of them not digging, no one's doing the research. So we have to assume responsibility for doing the research. And doing the research means not only traveling to those places, but cultivating relationships with the people who live there, specifically the elders who live there, who have the knowledge inside of them. And many of them are looking for young souls that they can share this knowledge with before they leave the planet. So what I found in Kemet specifically is that is the greatest repository of human knowledge that's ever been compiled. So one should go there with an understanding that we're just looking at less than 1/5 of what was there and looking at the ruins. You know, it took me 13 trips to Egypt before I finally stopped tripping. You know, I'm going to Egypt thinking I want to find the tomb of Imhotep, or the ancestors are going to touch me and I want to find this and find that. Once I put my ego out the way and allowed myself to really take in the essence of what is still there. And I say what is still there, speaking from a point of reference that my good friend Charles Finch, who Brother Chika spoke of earlier. What Finch often says, you know, we go to Kemet and we look at the ruins and we see them as ruins, but on another level, on a spiritual level, those structures are brand new. And those ancestors, those priests and priestesses are still moving in those sacred spaces in real time. And it's simply a matter of you recalibrating yourself to synchronize your energy with their energy. And that's what it took me 13 trips to Egypt before I realized that I was looking at it all wrong. Before I realized that even in its ruinous state, those Africans who built those temples 2,000 years ago were living, thinking, and functioning as human beings. And we are living and functioning on a subhuman level and don't even realize it. So when I use the word human, I'm using that word in its literal sense. The word human is a Sanskrit word, two Sanskrit words. Hu means God, and man means mind. Okay, so we are beings, physical beings, who have a consciousness which tethers us to the unlimited source of creation. So we're not just limited to actions here on the physical realm of existence. We can connect ourselves to all manners of being, past, present, and future, if you know that that's possible. And two, if you're able to put aside fear and allow yourself to begin to become acquainted with your authentic self. So a trip to Kemet for me affords any thinking person an opportunity to get to know their authentic selves. And when you come to that space with the right energy, the right consciousness, the right vibe, then you will feel the presence of those ancestors who are there and who are waiting for brothers and sisters with the right consciousness to walk through that space so that they then can begin to express themselves through you. Their ideas become your ideas. Their thoughts become your thoughts. And that's how it works. So we need, I suggest that those who are really interested in cultivating a higher sense of consciousness to begin that process by knowing that we are more than what our oppressor has ever told us we are. And that by putting aside fear and opening yourself up to spirit, opening yourself up to ancestors, we then can become the best vessels for them to work through and express themselves here on planet Earth.
Wow, that's a lot to unwrap right there. I don't even know where to start. In terms of things like the Rhiine papyrus, the construction of the mathematic papyrus, things of that nature, the first type of the first dentist that we know of, and other recorded scientific developments. Can you speak to that briefly? Brother Browder, yes.
Okay,
yes,
sure,
start with
sure,
you.
Sure. So, you mentioned the Rhiine mathematical papyrus, right? And the only reason it's called the Rhiine mathematical papyrus was because it was a British man named Rhiine who purchased it in Luxor. So all of these documents of our ancestors are named after thieves. So part of what we have to do is begin to study these documents from a different context. And so what is in that document is a series of mathematical equations that prove that Africans had developed geometry, trigonometry, calculus, thousands of years before the Greeks became the fathers of those skills that we now attribute to them. So so you mentioned the Rhiine papyrus, right? But let's also look at some of the other documents that are there. I'm really beginning to get a greater understanding and appreciation for the so-called pyramid texts that are in the burial chamber of Unas and Tichi. Those are the two sites that we can see in Kemet right now. And to understand that the so-called pyramid texts are the oldest religious texts ever recorded in the world, the oldest religious texts. And what they talk about is math and science and astronomy and spirituality. They essentially give you the essence of Western religions, that man is a physical body, a mental body, and a spiritual body. There are different dimensions of ourselves. And that when the physical body dies, the spirit returns to its creative source. And there's a process for that return. There is a place where that soul goes. And there are specific things that soul has to do as you make that journey. So all of this information has been cataloged. It is here for us to understand. But I think one of the most important aspects of that text is that it informs us that we come back, that we have been here before and we come back, and that there are certain things that one can do in this life while you're walking, talking, living, and breathing that will ensure your return at a higher physical, mental, and emotional state of being. So those are the 42 admonitions of Ma'at. Those are values and traditions that were instilled in a person from the cradle to the grave. So these are, I think, simple tools, if you will, which are accessible to us to begin to interpret with the right mind so that we can begin to make a choice as to how we are going to negotiate this life, right? And what I take from this is that it tells us that the power is in us, right? And that we are connected to an unlimited power source. And once we understand what we are, who we are, and how, our mental, physical, and spiritual bodies all work in concert in order to allow us here on earth to become creators. We are here to create. We're not here to beg anybody for anything. We have the capacity to bring into existence anything that we will ever need in our life. And they demonstrated how human beings who possess that knowledge did that, right? So my thing is, we need to stop tripping and be studious about studying what has been left behind. And in my humble estimation, it gives us a very clear roadmap as to how we can live our lives right now in order to ensure that when we come back, we will come back at a higher plane where we can experience life and do more of the things that we were incapable of doing in this life, but we are opening doors for ourselves and future generations. So for I guess the takeaway is, and I don't know if I'm really answering your question, but the takeaway for me is, all of these texts are really a guide, if you will, for how we, as the descendants of these ascended Africans, how we can begin to tap into the knowledge that they knew and live our lives at a higher level so that ultimately we can begin to create a space here in this country where there's enough of us with consciousness to begin to run the world again.
Thank you. That was powerful. And yes, you answered the question. We were talking about the specific types of contributions that we made, and you touched on a few. Dr. Akua, I have a two-part question, but before I get into that, would you like to add on to that in terms of contributions, like specifics, like we're talking about math, different forms of mathematics, health, same thing you'd like to add to that?
Oh,
now you're muted.
You got to do it too. You muted yourself, brother. Unmute yourself.
Thank you. There's so much that Tony covered. He was, very comprehensive with his, but I like to say, anything that you're studying, you need to check Kemet first in terms of its origin, just to be safe. You can rest assured that there is probably or likely an African origin to just about anything that you can think of. And I'll give you a quick example, because somebody could say, well, okay, Brother Chika, what about computers, right? We just got computers in the last, 20, 40 years or so. Well, do you know that the binary systems of zeros and ones comes out of Kemetic mathematics? So all of this stuff goes back to us. The very emojis and symbols and icons that are on your laptop, your cell phone, your desktop, all of those different things, that's pictographic writing. That comes out of the science of Medu Neter, or what the Greeks call hieroglyphics, but we called it Medu Neter. And so all of this stuff, if you're willing to go and look at it, will take you right back to us. But it's really about accessing it and using it to elevate our lives. When I listened to what Tony was saying, I think of a conversation I had with my wife and sons recently, where I told them, because most of our people are trying to survive, struggling to survive. And because we're struggling to survive, we're trying to make it to the first of the month, right? Or the end of the month, or that sort of thing. Whereas other people are planning 20, 50, and 100 years out. So I challenge the listeners right now, if you get a chance, I want you to Google Chinese ghost towns, Chinese ghost towns, and then click on images. And what you will see is that the Chinese have built entire cities that are currently uninhabited because they have projected what their population will be 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. Okay. So I told my wife and my sons, I said, okay, in the spirit of having a dynasty, we know that there were 30 primary dynasties in ancient Kemet, I believe it is. We're establishing a dynasty. Mm-hmm. And what I discovered through my research is I believe there were about 6, maybe 7 families that ruled Kemet for about a 1,000-year period. So it made me think, well, what kind of knowledge and skills did those families need to rule Kemet for 1,000 years? So I told my wife and my sons, I said, okay, the work that we do then, we are working towards having a 500 to 1,000 year impact through the books that I'm writing, through the lectures and presentations that I'm giving, through the things that we're establishing, the entire online platform that we're establishing. We're aiming at having a 500 to 1,000 year impact on our people and on humanity. That takes your sense of purpose to a whole nother level when you start thinking that far in advance of who we are and who we need to be and what we need to have in place. So I just wanted to make it really plain that though we're talking about ancient history and ancient science, it has a very modern application today.
Sure. But Chika, let me add to that, man. So your idea of establishing a 500-year or 1,000-year dynasty is right in line with what they did because of their understanding of the Rehime Mesu, the repetition of the birth. Mm-hmm. So you are coming back. So you are going to be the inheritor of the dynastic legacy that you're building right now. So you, your sons, your wife, your grandchildren, your great-great-grandchildren are all going to be a part of this continuum, which you are setting in motion right now. So today, the present moment is all there is. And everything that you do right now impacts all of the futures that you will ever live in your life. So if you understand that everything is interconnected, there's nothing that does not impact you at some point in time. In some life you will live at some point in time. So if you can begin to wrap your mind around that reality, then you'll be less wasteful with your words. You'll be less wasteful with your time. You will understand that this is you. You're running. It's not, it's you can't. I'm at the point in my life where I realize that I can't blame the things that I don't do on the system or the man or this person or that person. I know that it's on me and that I am not doing it by myself because the ancestors got my back. My mama, my grandparents, they all got my back. And when I ask them for guidance and protection, and they provide that love to me that lets me know that there's nothing that I can't do, and I tackle a situation with the knowledge that it's already done, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that then opens the way for them to strengthen their relationship with me. It also allows me to model for those within my environment how you overcome obstacles, because the skill that you get in meeting challenges and overcoming those challenges makes it easier for you and everyone who is around you. So that's part of that dynastic legacy that we are building just by being conscious of the fact that we're coming back and we're going to inherit the things that we have set in motion in this lifetime.
I hadn't even thought about that aspect of it.
Yeah, those types of things come out of HAPI Talks. Thank you for that, Brother Browder. That was powerful. Definitely making that connection. Dr. Akua, also with you and making it real. I think it's important that we connect the ancient to the present, if you will. And for a lot of people who don't necessarily understand and get it, why is this information so important? For a lot of our people, let's be honest, be frank, by and large, they're not really interested in what happened 5,000 years ago. But making and giving an example like that gives them an opportunity or vehicle for them to now take it in. And definitely shout out to you for doing that. Dr. Akua, is there a correlation between science and spirituality?
Absolutely. In my estimation, based on ancient African science, there is no separation between the two. But in Western culture, they have created a schism or a separation that does not exist for African people or really any indigenous people. So science and spirituality, those are two sides of the same coin, if you will. So to an African, well, let me say it the way Professor Kaba Kamene says it. He says, science is seeing spirituality, and spirituality is kind of hidden science, so to speak. But another way of looking at it is you can't separate the spiritual from the material, right? The spiritual is the essence of the material, and the material is the outer manifestation of the spiritual. So you can't separate the two. But then we were born into a system that attempts to so-called separate church and state and sacred and secular. None of these are realities for African people. You know, and so again, that consciousness, walking in that spirit and in that consciousness allows you to make certain decisions that will get you different life outcomes. So the short answer to your question is no, there's no separation between science and spirituality. But the more we lean on Western science, then the more difficulty we'll have with that. But even Western science now is digging deep and has always dug deep into our sacred science. But when you go back and you look at how far back our science goes, and you know, I teach history of American higher education at Clark Atlanta University, and I told my doctoral students, you know, when you look back into ancient Kemet and you look at how far it extends back, we know political Kemet, as Asa Hillier would say, political Kemet was about 3 to 4 years old, but cultural Kemet extended back tens of thousands of years. So when the Greeks invaded Kemet, they gained control in some measure of the priesthood. And there was one priest named Miran Jehudi. They referred to him as Manetho. And they asked him, well, how old is this civilization? And he said, about 24,000 years. So I try to wrap your mind around that for just a moment. 24,000 years. In the Gregorian calendar, we're in the year 2021 right now. We're talking about 24,000 years. America has only existed, I think, what, just under 250 years, right? So wrap your mind around how long that really is. And then for him to know that, because he was a priest and a scholar, the scholars were priests and the priests were scholars. For him to know that, there had to be a scientific body of literature that tracked how old the civilization was. From the founding of the first calendar, from the establishment of what we call the Great Year, which is right around 25,000 years, where Africans were calculating How long it took for the Earth to spin on its axis and for that axis to make a complete rotation was 25,000 years and some change. How many years of scientific calculations and research literature did they have to have in order to calculate the great year being just over 25,000 years? So that lets you know how long we've been at this and the great lengths people will go to cover up this information to keep us from understanding who we truly are. Tony used the word nature. He talked about how important studying nature is, and that nature is the showcase of science. And we know that the word nature comes from the Kemetic word necher, which is one of the first words for the divine or the divinity. Okay. And so I'm often, having these conversations, with my sons, because that word nature was mistranslated into gods. And if you came up in a Judeo-Christian household and you start talking about gods, that's an immediate disconnect, because, oh no, there's only one God. And so we get all confused due to mistranslation. A god or a nature is simply a force of nature. So right now the NBA playoffs are going on. LeBron James and others, he's a force of nature on the basketball court. Serena Williams was a force of nature on the tennis court. You're a force of nature as a filmmaker, right? And so until we each rediscover the force of nature that is within us, then we can't live our full lives. And we have to understand our deep science and spirituality to tap into that. And so that's one thing that I definitely want to leave with the listeners, is that you are a force of nature, but a force of nature at what? And what we want to do is we want to be a force of nature at bringing good into the world, at living by the principles of Ma'at, truth, justice, righteousness, and so forth, and at a particular skill, because we've all been sent to this particular time, place, and space for powerful purpose and a mighty mission.
Peace. Thank you for that, Professor Browder. Dr. Akua just threw you a nice lob pass. We talked about the great year. So we're talking about the great year. Could you please give us some context in relation to the zodiac calendar and Dendara, how that's connected to the great year?
All right, listen, can I do something else though? I want to take that question and do something else with it. As
long as you dunk the ball.
Huh?
As long as you dunk it.
I'm gonna dunk the ball, believe me. In light of what is coming next month. Now, there's a bigger picture that I want us to begin to prepare ourselves for. Some of you all may have seen the 60 Minutes show Sunday before last, where the host interviewed several pilots, Air Force pilots, who said that they saw UFOs. And the government, the Pentagon, is about to release an official document to an agency within Congress, which oversees UFOs. They've been pushing for this for about a decade or so. And the government has been sitting on this information for quite some time. Well, next month, they're going to have hearings on the Hill discussing, what did they call it? They instead of UFOs, the Pentagon's new word is UAF, unidentified aerial phenomenon, right? But they have already said in so many words that these things exist, right? They've already said that they exist. So one of the things that we've always been dealing with is the fact that, the government has been holding back information because they're afraid of how people are going to respond. It's going to cause a panic. It's going to do this. So if they are going to acknowledge next month that UFOs are real, then we're going to have to start wrapping our minds around some other information that's going to be coming our way soon. Now, when we look at Kemet, when we look at the Nile Valley, we see evidence within the Nile Valley, as well as especially in Southern Africa and in West Africa with the Dogon and other cultures. We already see in their traditions, they talk about connections with beings that we may refer to as aliens. But in the Dogon cosmology, they talk about Amma coming down in a granary And the description is a description of a ship of some kind landing in the granary that had seeds for all the genetic material on Earth, and then seeding land here on Earth. That's what they're saying. So what I want folk to begin to prepare yourselves for is that when this information starts to come out, and it's going to start coming out in June, and it will trickle out more over the course of the next year, then the issue that we're going to have to deal with is the fact that we're not alone in the universe, right? And just because we're not alone in the universe is nothing for us to be fearful about, because in the ancient texts, they've always talked about their ancestors in Potolo or Sigitolo, Sirius A or Sirius B. They've always talked about in Sahu, the constellation of Orion. The first star in the belt of Orion is the specific porthole where all souls go to be reborn. That's in the pyramid text. So everything within these texts speak to a process by which information was seeded here on Earth from elsewhere. Now, I'll leave this with you, and just to throw this out here. About 15 or so years ago, I was engaged in a conversation with Richard Hoagland. Richard Hoagland was the science director for, what was that show on ABC with Ted Koppel? What was the name of that show?
Nightline?
Nightline, right. He was a science editor on Nightline. And Richard Hoagland is the guy who wrote the book called The Monuments of Mars. And in 1976, when the United States sent the first satellite that landed on Mars, they found something on Mars, which they never shared with the public. And Hoagland, doing his research, found out that based on some of the satellites that they have at the Goddard Space Flight Center, which is less than 10 miles from where I currently live in Goddard, Maryland, they have satellite imagery of what appears to be pyramidal-like structures and temples that are oriented to what is the Martian equivalent of the summer solstice. And there's a huge sphinx-like face, right? So Hoagland, anyway, Hoagland had mentioned specifically about the research that was being done in the King's Chamber of the pyramid, the so-called air shafts. And there were German engineers that designed this small mobile device to go up the ramp and to see what's in that shaft. And this device went up, I don't know how many hundreds of feet, until it ran into a door inside of this 9x9 square shaft that extends through the northern and southern parts of the King's Chamber. And so they backed this device out, this robot out, and attached the device to take apart the hinges on the door and sent it back inside and opened the door. And he said that what they found, and this is something that was never released to the public, but what they found, because you can get a lot of information with an autographed copy of Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, right? What they found, he said, was a small statue of a Black man sitting in the lotus position, looking out at the star Sahu, right? So folk have been sitting on information for generations, information that they don't know how to process, information that they are afraid of. And it's information that I feel holds the key to us truly discovering who we are and what we have the capacity to do. So the question that I have regarding that possibility is, if in fact Earth was seeded and this knowledge was brought to Earth from elsewhere, and it was used to jumpstart civilization, advanced civilizations thousands of years ago, right? That's where all the evidence goes. Then if those ancestors came here from elsewhere and they look like us, then what would happen if they came back next year and saw the state that we are living in right now? Would they be upset with us for having squandered the gifts that they left us, or would they be upset at the European for the things that they've done to us. But the truth of the matter is, and getting back to a point that someone said in the comments, the Europeans, we would not be in this situation were it not for us violating certain spiritual laws. We messed up. And as a result of us messing up, us violating certain laws, we then fell from power, disconnected ourselves from this source, and that then opened the door for outsiders to come in and take everything that our ancestors had created away from us. So if the problem was us, it also means the solution is us. So we don't have time to feel sorry about ourselves. We don't have time to worry about what we did. All we have time for is to reconnect ourselves to that power source and prepare ourselves for what is coming. And I think everybody can feel it. There's something in the air. There's something that's happening all around us that to me is a harbinger of some major game-changing activities that are coming. And the question is, how prepared are we to deal with these events when they show up?
Wow. Thank you. Dua. Family, please take this opportunity. As you can see, this is a very powerful discussion. Like and share the video. Definitely want to get it out. Yes, Miko, very powerful discussion. My mind is blown. So we got to get this information out. Dr. Akua, what's the connection with African sacred science and astrology?
Wow. That's funny that you mentioned that. My mother made her transition last year, and she was the first one who introduced me to astrology. But let me say this in conjunction with what Tony just said. When my sons are joking with me and they say, "Oh, Dad, you're old," or "You sound old," and different things like that, I always agree with them. I say, "You're absolutely right. I'm older than the hills and more ancient than the stars, but I'm young at heart." And they know that quote by heart now because I say it so often. But I mean that, and I say that to say, as Tony said before, we've been here before. You know, if all you think is that you were born on a certain date and that you're going to die on a certain date in a few years, you have a very, very limited perspective on life that is not grounded or rooted in African spiritual traditions or scientific traditions. And so it's very, very important that we kind of reorient ourselves in terms of time. And here's why. Time of day determines your activities. You know, if it's early in the morning, I'm going to get up, I'm going to do my meditation and my prayers, and then I'm going to go work out. And I have a certain routine every morning, right? Time of day determines my activity. If it's later in the day, you may see me in front of my computer working on a manuscript or doing a training for teachers and leaders. Time of day determines your activity. Well, what does it mean when we talk about, as Dr. Benjamin E. Mays would say, it's 11:59 on the clock of destiny. Time of day. When you talk about the great year being this 25,000 year cycle, and that we are now coming to the end and the coincidentally the beginning of a new 25,000 year cycle. Time of day determines or should determine your activity. And so what activities should we be involved in? The activities that we should be involved in are returning to our source, returning to our spiritual and cultural source. If you return to the cultural source, it'll take you to the spiritual source. And if you turn to the spiritual source, it'll take you to the cultural source. Okay? So it's very important that we understand that. When you speak of astrology, that was the language our ancestors used to explain celestial phenomena in earthly terms, so that you could read the structure of the sky and understand or get an understanding of what was going on earth. And so it was said, as above, so below. There's order in the heavens. There should be order on earth. There should be order in my life. As above, so below. And so they structured their monuments, their temples, the pyramids, all of those are structured based on monuments in the sky. So, of course, the three stars in the belt of Sahu, which the Greeks called Orion the Hunter, those are the Great Pyramids, and the pyramids at the Giza Plateau are perfectly aligned with the belt of Sahu, as above, so below. We know that the Milky Way is really the Nile in the sky. It's the continuation of the Nile on Earth, or rather, the Nile on Earth would be a continuation of the Nile in the sky. So everything, Earth was a mirror reflection of the divinity and order that we saw in the heavens. And astrology was one way that we took this deeply complex information and we simplified it by telling stories about it and by giving principles personalities, and by naming these different principles and giving them names and personalities and things of that nature. So astrology, this is how my mother explained it to me, because my mother was a nurse. She was a registered nurse, RN, and she used to work the night shift. And it was my job as a child was to wake her up around 9:45 p.m. so she could get ready to go to work. And I remember, you know, several times during my childhood, she would say, "Oh Lord, it's a full moon." I said, what's that mean? She said, "The patient's gonna be acting crazy tonight." I said, "What do you mean? What full moon have to do with the patient's acting crazy?" And she said, "Well, your body is 70 to 90% water. And if the moon can change the ebb and the flow of the tides, you know, of the ocean and rivers, and your body is 70 to 90% water, then the moon has an impact on your emotional state." And so certain things like that that she would tell me, I wouldn't agree or deny. I just kind of hide it in my heart. And then come to find out years later, it tied perfectly in with African sacred science. And so that's what I share with people now. When I share a thought or an idea that may seem hard to grasp, I say, I'm not asking you to believe a word that I say, but please don't dismiss it. Just hide it in your heart, and maybe you may find a deeper understanding of it later in your life. So I think that's part of the connection that we need to be aware of as it relates to astronomy. And it's so related to so many different things that we do. And I'm sure Tony has some things to share about that as well.
Well, you know, it's funny. I'm sorry, Taki. I'll let you.
No. Go ahead, brother. I'll come back. What I wanted to ask.
I wanted to veggie back on what Chika just said. The first time I brought Finch here to DC, he said the same thing. Finch was a emergency room physician, and he said, "I hate to be in the emergency room during the time of the full moon, because we get some of the most bizarre cases, stabbings and shootings and all kinds of things happen within that 3-day window of the full moon." If you have any friends who work at the police department, and they would tell you that there's always an uptick in certain type of violent crimes during the time of the full moon. So the idea that the earth is impacted by the moon, which, as you said, Chika, pulls the water towards the moon and creates the high and low tides, 2 high tides and low tides every day. But if the moon is also pulling the water in the earth, the oceans, the lakes, the streams, the rivers, it's also pulling the atmosphere, right? So we've got all types of pressure going on inside us and outside of us that is impacting us physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So part of the idea of studying the heavens, the sun, the moon, the stars, is to know what that impact is going to be every day of the year, and the cycles associated, and the yearly cycles associated with the placement of these celestial bodies. It allows you to be able to chart out the best moves for you to make. So to get back to your question, Taki, is that astrologos, and knowledge of the stars, is not the stuff that we see today in the newspapers. That it pales in comparison to the deep way of connecting to the universe that our ancestors knew was the only way forward for us. So we have to get back to nature. And one of the best ways of getting back to nature is by going out and taking a walk, right? I've heard several people, several holistic physicians say that one of the things that you should do to realign your energy to the energy of Earth is to walk on grass barefoot. You know, we're walking on concrete all the time. We're in these houses that are hermetically sealed, and all kinds of outgases are being are in the environment because of the heat, and we're ingesting all of these things which are impacting us both physically and mentally. So one of the things that we can do to get ourselves back in balance is to spend some time outside walking in nature, spend some time looking at the stars. So this week has been the full moon and the first lunar eclipse of this decade, right? So these events are happening all the time. And as Chika said earlier, our ancestors knew that these things were happening because they have been recording it for thousands of years, cataloging this information and passing it down from generation to generation. So those who understand the relationship that Earth has with the moon and every celestial body knows that this is serious science. And the more you spend time recalibrating yourself to this energy, the better off you're going to be.
Thank you. This question is for either one, you brothers. Is there a connection with the great year and the so-called circle of animals or the zodiac?
You know, whether it's the regular year or the great year, everything is happening. Everything is moving. And the takeaway is everything is moving. Everything that comes goes, and nothing that goes is lost. It's coming back again. So it's about studying the patterns, studying the cycles, right? And understanding how we are as individuals impacted by these cycles, the cycles of the moon, the cycle. So I'm saying all that to say, for me, rather than focusing on, you know, a 25,000 year cycle, let's look at the 365-day cycle, right? Let's master that, right?
Or the 24-hour cycle. How about
the 24-hour cycle, right? You know, and if once we learn to master that, then it's easier to begin to branch out and deal with the 1,200-year cycle, 2,500-year cycle, and then there's an even larger cycle, you know, beyond that. LeGrand Clegg talks about all of this stuff, man, and it gets heavy. But my thing is, let's focus on what we have access to right now, what we can control and deal with right now. And the more that you can master your immediate circumstances, the better off you're going to be able to deal with those things that will be happening 5 years from now, 10 years from now, a lifetime or 2 or 3 from now. Everything that you're going to do, you're preparing for it right now. So, you know, focus on what's happening around you, master your mind, master your environment, and you'll be ultimately able to master your destiny.
Facts. With that, you definitely want to just kind of take a quick break and kind of just talk about, you know, supporting what these brothers are doing. Professor Browder, just want to give us a quick update on the ASA Restoration Project and how they can support you, how they can support the project, excuse me.
Yes, sir. Well, we are getting ready to begin our 13th season on June the 1st. And we have a number of exciting things that we will be, I'm sure by the fall, I'll be sharing with you a lot of good news of some discoveries. So we're 13 years into restoring these Kushite temple tombs on the west bank of Luxor. And the realization that I finally came to last year after 12 years of doing this work and finding 4 new tombs, it finally dawned on me that every time we find a new tomb, and these are all Kushite tombs, 2,700-year-old Kushite tombs, every time we find a tomb that has been desecrated by the Greeks, by the Romans, by the Coptics, by the Arabs, and even by the Kemites themselves of the 26th dynasty. Every time we find a tomb and find the name of the original occupant of that tomb and speak that ancestor's name, we are now giving them power and making it possible for them to come back and re-inhabit their sacred space. So the significance of what we've been doing is just really starting to become apparent to me now. You know, I thought I was just, excavating and restoring tombs, but what we're actually doing is reconnecting with ancestors who have been waiting for thousands of years for us to connect with them, and they have things that they want us to do. So we don't just reconnect with them just to say we reconnected with them. We connect with them because they have knowledge to share with us that can help us through difficult times that we may be heading into right now, so that we can come on top. So that's what the Asa Restoration Project is doing for me. And, I'm appreciative of everyone who understands the significance of what we're doing and have made contributions. And if you wish to continue to support our work, you can just go to ikg-info.com. Or I think Felicia put up the link to the Asa Restoration Project. So see what we're doing. And if you feel that this is a worthy investment of your funds, then please make a tax-deductible contribution and help us continue this work.
Please, family, support this project. It's an immensely important project to us as a people. The brother's working on it for 13 years. We like to say us at HAPI, we are avid supporters of this. We have to please get behind this as a community. Only way this is going to work. Dr. Akua, understand you have some things going on, a couple books and manuscripts that you've written and also in the process of developing. Can you speak to that for a second, please?
Sure. First, I want to let people know about our free online course. You can go to free intro to africanorigins.com. It's on the screen right now. Again, free intro to africanorigins.com. And that's a series of 6 videos that when you put your email address in, it will send you those 6 free videos, 1 per day over a 6-day period. So we hope everybody will take advantage of that, where we're talking about a number of subjects like African sacred science, the African origins of our faith, Majesty of the Moors, and so much more. So we definitely want people to take advantage of that. For some of my books, you can go to tticlassroom.com. TTI stands for Teacher Transformation Institute. So a number of our books are being used in public schools, private schools, independent African-centered schools, religious schools, and so forth. But what we've done is we've taken a lot of the African sacred science and we've put it in the form of stories, classroom activities that children, parents, and teachers can access to make this knowledge and this wisdom plain. To give you an example, probably if it's not our bestseller, it's one of our bestsellers, and it's my book called A Treasure Within, Stories of Remembrance and Rediscovery. It's a book of 3 short stories in which young people have encounters with ancient African ancestors to learn about our original morals, values, history, and culture. In the stories, you have young people going through things that all young people go through in terms of situations of peer pressure, potential violence, loss of a loved one, but they're surrounded by at least one adult who helps them to navigate through their challenges, and they also each have an encounter with an ancient African ancestor. There's also an activity guide that goes with that book with all sorts of activities to teach them about our ancient history and culture. We have a 2-volume set called Words of Power, which contains together almost 400 quotes and proverbs from African people and powerful people all over the world. We have a book called Reading Revolution, which contains 90 reading selections with 10 multiple choice questions for each reading selection. So all of these different things have been created for the purpose of helping our people to reconnect to their roots. They're all written in plain language that will help you to develop, help our students to develop their reading comprehension, as well as their reading fluency, cultural awareness, and character development all at the same time. So if you go to tticlassroom.com, click on Books by Akua, and you'll see those books and many, many more.
Thank you for that. And with that being said, we're also going to give 5 copies to the first 5 people, I should say, of your book, The Honoring Our Ancestors' Obligations, 7 Steps of Black Student Success. So those people are interested in getting a free copy, since given from us to you, email us at infohapifilm@gmail.com. And I'm sure Felicia put it on the screen. First 5 people, we're going to honor a copy of that. I want to shout out to all those who supported us with the super chats. Thank you very much. Haven't looked to see if any cash apps. Please, those who are interested, your continued support is greatly appreciated. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you for those people with the cash apps this evening. Anyone also who is interested in just supporting HAPI, we got some new gear here as well. And got the new t-shirts is on the website. Got the summer colors out. Please go get your support HAPI t-shirts and the DVD and the digital copy. Professor Browder, with that being said, you spoke with something a second ago, and you kind of opened the door for one of the, it's almost like intuitively opened the door for the next question for you. And oh man, yeah, I lost my place, man. Where I wanted to be. How significant is honoring our ancestors, and how is this function performed?
Well, let me give you one example. Friday the 13th, November, Friday the 13th, I think it was 1998. I was in Egypt with a group, and I was debating whether or not I wanted to do a study tour the following year. I've been doing study tours, annual study tours to Egypt since 1987. So I was feeling a little strained, and I wanted to take a break, and wasn't really sure if I wanted to do a study tour the following year. And I couldn't make up my mind. And so I decided, I got up early in the morning. It was Friday the 13th, November, Friday the 13th. And we were in Luxor, at a hotel in Luxor. And I went and set out by the Nile at sunrise, so I can do a meditation and just kind of clear my mind. And one of the things that I do whenever I have an issue is call on my grandmother for guidance. She is an ancestor that I know loves me. I love her, and she's always looking out for me. So I asked, I said, Mama, what should I do? Should I do a trip to Egypt next year? And I could hear her voice plain as day say, baby, if you don't want to do a trip to Egypt next year, don't do a trip to Egypt next year. And that's all it took for me to say, okay, I'm not doing a trip next year. Just listening to my grandmother, right? So it just so happened, I'll cut through it quickly. Back at that time, I was doing my study tours in the fall, in late October, early November. So I wouldn't compete with Asa, who was doing his study tours during the summer. And as I was coming back from a speaking engagement on the West Coast, I had a connecting flight in Detroit to come back to DC. And as I'm walking through the terminal to get to my connecting flight, I see a newspaper that says, headline on the newspaper says airplane crash. I said, oh, wow, that's bad, but I don't want to focus on that because I'm about to get on another airplane. I get on my plane to come back to DC, and the plane had just come from DC. It did a quick turnaround, and someone had left a newspaper, a copy of the Washington Post, on the seat. And I grabbed the newspaper and walked back to my seat, opened up the newspaper, and it said Egypt air crash, yesterday. And I'm like, oh my God, that's terrible. I get back home, settling in, and I get all these calls from people, all these messages on my phone asking me, Tony, are you okay? Give me a call. Let me know you're okay. And then finally, one of the calls was from the mother of an ex-girlfriend of mine who said, Tony, give me a call and let me know where your black ass is. You normally go to Egypt around this time of year. I heard about the plane crash, and I want to make sure that you're okay. And that's when it hit me that the plane that I would normally have taken to travel to Egypt that year would have been that same plane that crashed. So I realized then that listening to my grandmother saved my life. And that's not the only time that's happened, but that's one that comes instantaneously to my mind. And the thing that makes that moment so real for me is that that June, my ex-wife, my daughter's mother died. So if I had not listened to my grandmother, if I had not been connected to her and listened to her, my daughter would have lost her mother and her father the same year. So I know that ancestors are real. And I know that, you know, when I have my altar and I primarily appeal to those ancestors who I knew personally, who are part of my family, and I know have a vested interest in making sure that I'm safe. And I appeal to them for guidance and direction. And they have never let me down. The things that I've done in my life over the past 40 years, I have done because of my connection with them. And so if nothing else, I want to encourage everyone listening to this chat this evening. I want to encourage everyone to consider cultivating a stronger relationships with your ancestors. Set up an altar in your home. And it could be done very simply in the western part of your house. Find a small table, put a white tablecloth on it, flowers, pictures of those ancestors, you know, some water, and just make that your holy of holies. Make that your space where you go to reconnect with those souls that you know love you dearly, right? And they are the source of your power. And as you do that, as you strengthen that relationship, you will be amazed at what you now will have the capacity to know, to feel, and to do, because you are connected to a source that has connected you to the ultimate source. And as long as we maintain these connections, we're going to be okay.
Thank you, brother. Dr. Akua, how do we connect our God consciousness to our minds, to our minds to become co-creators? Like, how do we do that?
Well, I always like to say a mind disconnected from its creator is a weapon of mass destruction. You know, when you're consciously connected to the creator, then you begin to realize that you are endowed with the same or similar power to be a creator. And we're making decisions every day, like Tony was saying earlier. If it's too much for you to wrap your mind around a 25,000 year cycle or 2,500 year cycle or 1,200 year cycle, work on mastering the year, and you work on mastering the year by mastering the month, and you work on mastering the month by mastering the day. So to me, the highest science, the highest technology is really love. Did you make somebody smile today? You know, if you smile at somebody, they're likely to smile back at you. Did you make somebody smile today? Did you tell somebody that you love them today? Did you give somebody a hug today? Did you make somebody feel better or feel that they had more of a sense of purpose and sense of worth? If you did any of those things, then you are radiating the love and the light of the Most High. And to me, that's the highest science. That's the highest technology. And I want to make that very clear, because when we get to talking about ancient history, or when we get to going way out into the cosmos and talking about astronomy and astrology and different things like that, for some people, that may be difficult for them to grasp. But when you break this down into your daily activities, the people that you interact with, the work that you're involved with, those are the types of things that I think make all the difference in the world, and help us to understand that we're creating our own reality. And we have to be increasingly intentional about how we do that. So one of the ways that I try to be more intentional about doing that is through my meditation and visualization at the beginning of every day. Some people have referred to this as pre-paving your day. This same way a road is paved, when you get in your quiet space and you close your eyes and you begin to envision how you would like for your day to unfold. And the more detail, the better. It doesn't mean that your day is going to unfold exactly as you envisioned it, although sometimes it has. Sometimes it's even better than I envisioned it. But what it does is it centers us and allows us to be better equipped to face whatever comes our way. So I'll leave you with this final analogy or illustration rather. If you think of a circle with a dot in the middle, a circle with a dot in the middle, the circle represents your family and your community. The dot in the middle represents you. Now, if you think of all the things that you would want in your family and in your community, love, joy, peace, prosperity, safety, security, we have access to all of that and more as long as we stay centered, like the dot in the middle of the circle. Centered in what? Centered in the best of our culture. But for most of our people, they haven't been exposed to the best of our culture. They've been exposed to the worst of our culture. And so if you can imagine now that dot that was in the center of the circle being drawn outside of the circle, whereas we were centered and had access to the love, the joy, the peace, and the prosperity, now we've been decentered. And what begins to emerge is all of the challenges, the trials, the tribulations, the violence, the drugs, the guns, the family separation, all the different things, that we have to face when we become decentered. So for us, then, this re-education process is a recentering process into our highest self. So when we take that time to meditate, to close our eyes, to maybe put on some soothing or inspirational music, to pre-pave our day, we're recentering ourselves. And all of our power, all of our spiritual and cultural power is in that centering process. Now, what I've just described to you, when I talked about the circle with the dot in the middle, do you know that one of the ancient symbols of the Most High was a circle with a dot in the middle, or the Aten, the sun disk? Not that we worship the sun, but that we saw the sun as a power generator, that there can be no life in the solar system without the sun, in the same way there can be no life without the Most High. And so when we are constantly going through this process of recentering ourselves, sometimes we bump up against the edges of the circle. Somebody says something to you, it upsets you, and you're about to go off. No, come back to center. Don't waste your energy on that. But this is a daily process of mastering self and rising into becoming that nature, that force of nature, or that God consciousness. So I hope that kind of gives an example to begin to make it clear.
Thank you, Professor Browder. Same question. How do we connect the God mind consciousness to become co-creators?
Well, my formal training is as an artist. And one of the most significant lessons that I've learned as an artist is that to the point that Chika was making, once you are inspired, once you have centered yourself and you go inside, that's where everything exists. I like to say that as an artist, artists get their inspiration from what the average person refers to as nothing. And nothing is not nothing in the traditional sense of the word. Nothing is the source of everything. Everything that is or will be already exists. So once you learn how to be still and tap into that stream of nothingness, which is the source of everything, then these thoughts and ideas begin to flow into your head. And as Chika said, you like pave the road. You decide based on this idea of what you want to do, and you see yourself doing that. You have to give yourself specific instructions or permission to say or see specific things. And the purpose of the body is to respond to the mind, respond to the directions which come from the mind. And the purpose of a spirit is to provide direction to the mind itself. So you're creating opportunities to be still, to align yourself to the source of everything. And once you're tethered to that source, then you ask for what you need for the day, or what you desire for the week or for the month. And then you continue that process. And what you will find is the things that you saw in this meditative state will become a reality, because that is the process for which everything is created. everything that exists within our world began first as a thought in someone's mind. That is the source of everything. So once you cultivate a relationship with that source of everything, then it makes the impossible possible for you, if that makes sense.
It does. Well, the temples along the Nile, conveyors to assist people in making their God consciousness mind to become co-creators.
Well, you know, if you think about the architecture of the temples, you know, every temple began with the Holy of Holies, right? And that was a sacred space in the East where the spirit of that specific nature dwelled. And then you would build out toward the West. You typically had the hypostyle hall. And the hypostyle hall was to represent the papyrus fields where Atan first began the process of creating the world. So you have the Holy of Holies, the residence of specific aspect of the creator, and then that sacred space which upon which the creator brought things into existence. And then outside of that, you have the open air sun court. So there's a specific architectural structure to the construction of each temple. So you have the open air sun court, and then you have the pylons. And the pylons are built to a specific angle, and the pylons themselves represent the Kemetic symbol of the Aket, the horizon, the place where the sun rises and sets. So, and then around the entire temple itself, connected to the pylons, you have the mud brick wall, which is an undulating mud brick wall, which again mirrors the primordial waters. So what you have with each temple is the sacred space where creation takes place. And so you have to have priests and priestesses who understand how to maintain that temple's connection to that source of power. Every temple was connected to a specific celestial being where that nature dwelled. And after a period of approximately 1,200 years, because the earth is constantly moving, and we move through the 12 signs of the zodiac every 1,200 years, then that temple is no longer oriented to that specific nature. So that temple is then deconstructed, and the stone from that old temple is used as foundation stone to build the new temple. So in other words, the stone from the old temple becomes metaphorically the seed from which that new temple is going to grow in its new alignment to that celestial system in the sky. And so within this sacred space, you have heaven on earth. And so the priest and priestess's responsibility was to maintain that connection. Now, along that line, only certain people were allowed access to certain portions of the temple, because one had to be able to move in those sacred spaces with your mind properly attuned. So if you think in terms of what's a good hallmark for me is George G.M. James's 10 virtues, right? So you had to master that knowledge in order to be able to perform the tasks that you were required to perform within certain spaces within that temple. And I dare say that the masses of folk never got past the open air sun court because they had not properly trained their minds such that if they were to come into this sacred space with an untrained mind, the energy of the untrained mind would disrupt the energy within the sacred spaces of this temple. So if you can follow my train of thought, that's the reason why the priest or priestess would train their children to follow in their footsteps. So you would have this intergenerational transference of knowledge so that you could maintain this continuity, and the process can continue for the thousands of years that Chika talked about at the beginning of this talk. So it is a continuum, and we are part of that continuum. So I think I answered your question.
Yeah, you definitely did.
Okay.
Dr. Akua, you certainly are one who is intimately involved with development and leadership development in the community. Seems like you've taken a forefront directive role and active role in doing that. And when I think of the now and the temples and just the initiation process, and the importance of it, the rites of passage. And could you just make the connection between what you're doing now and what would have occurred thousands of years ago along the temples of the now? And is there a connection between the two?
There is for me. I can't necessarily say that's the case, in all schools and colleges and universities, but I'm very intentional about
No,
that.
I'm talking about, yeah, for you, exactly.
Sure. So even from the days when I taught middle school, I always regarded a school year to be like a rites of passage. In any rites of passage, the initiate comes in at one level of consciousness, and at the end of that process, they should be at a higher level of consciousness and commitment. One of my teachers, Coach Alfred Powell, who's written some phenomenal books.
Yeah, I remember him.
He talked about, he said, it's not a classroom, it's a class womb. I got to thinking about that. And when you look at the mathematics of that, we know there are 12 months in a year. You take away 2 months for the summer break. You take away a couple of more, 2 weeks for the winter break, another week for spring break, and then another week for various other holidays. What do you have left? You have 9 months. This is what I teach teachers and leaders. It's not a classroom, it's a class womb. And at the end of that year, you're going to give birth to something, right? And so when my students come into my class womb, it is very, very carefully structured, even in an online platform, so that they go through what our ancestors called the Wahimi Mesu. The Wahimi Mesu is the rebirth into higher consciousness, okay? And that was the goal of all education in Kemet, was to go through this continuous rebirth. So for example, in the crown of the kings, you would oftentimes see the raised serpent. Well, when you look and you study nature, and remember, the original name of nature is nature. When you study nature, what you find is that the raised serpent or the cobra would shed its skin approximately 5 to 6 times per year. That represents transformation and regeneration. So why do we have the cobra at the forehead? That represents the transformation of the mind, the continuous transformation of the mind, or what Asa Hilliard would call the reawakening of the African mind. And so this is a process that we take students through in our classes by exposing them not only to our ancient history and to our modern history through whatever we're studying, but looking at it through the lens of Africans, through our views, through our values, being rooted and grounded in our values, which is so very, very important. So that's kind of that is the approach that I take. And I take that approach because I understand that my presence as a teacher is not someone who just happened to appear. We know the ancient saying that says, when the student is ready, a teacher shall appear. So my interaction with my students, I regard as a divine encounter. And it's something that I use, hopefully, to build for eternity as our ancestors instructed us.
Powerful. And just as you were talking, I was just thinking of the temple construction. It's designed as a birthing process, and that, out of the darkness comes light, and almost speaking to exactly what you're saying, not a classroom, but a class womb, and just making the connection between that in the ancient structures. Professor Browder, are we truly cosmic dust?
So earlier, Chika mentioned Charles Finch's book, Star of Deep Beginnings. And I was listening to Finch earlier this month doing a radio interview. And he mentioned something that's in that book, Star of Deep Beginnings, but it just shot past me. And listening to him repeat it that Thursday just really shook me. He spoke to the Dogon cosmology, which centers around Sirius A and Sirius B, right? Sirius B, Potolo and Sigitolo. So Sirius B is a dwarf star, one of the heaviest objects in the universe. It's invisible to the naked eye. And it took NASA scientists until like 100 years to discover its existence. But the Dogon not only knew of Sirius B 500 years ago, but they traced its orbit around Sirius A. Well, Finch has shared that Sirius B was a white dwarf, but before that, before it became a white dwarf, it was a red giant. And a red giant is a star that is, I forget the technical term for all the energy that is building up, but it expands and then it collapses on itself. And in its collapse, there's this explosion. And so what he shared was that the explosion from a star similar to Sirius B, it may have been Sirius B, which is, I think he said 9 light years away from us, or a star similar to that, was responsible for creating our solar system, right? So the general consensus among cosmologists is, you know, the Big Bang theory, and from the Big Bang, you had all these systems, solar systems, cosmic dust, and what have you. So we are made of stardust. That is real. Our solar system was made from the explosion of a red giant. I don't know how many millions or billions of years ago. And so as that energy moved away from its source and cooled, it began to coalesce. And in the coalescing, it formed stars, it formed planets, it formed moons. And then they did that cosmic dance around that star, and it became a solar system. So we are comprised of that same material, right? So if you can wrap your mind around that, we are more than just these physical beings. We are cosmic beings. We are connected to everything in the universe. So when you can begin to think of yourself as not so much a child of the west side of Chicago, but a child of the universe, a child of the cosmos, right? And my domain is everywhere, right? There are no limitations on my beingness. So when you can begin to escape from the mental prisons that we are socialized to live in and be comfortable living in this society, and literally free your mind, you now are opening yourself up to a higher form of knowledge, which can help you manifest your true purpose for being, or what Dr. Wilson used to refer to as your cosmic assignment. We are all here to fulfill our cosmic assignment. And so the key is to be still and to align yourself with the commitment that your soul made to this physical body in the prior lifetime, right? So if again, just wrap your mind around that we chose to come back in these bodies in this particular lifetime for specific lessons that will help us better negotiate this life and all the lives to come. And if we can begin to accept that and realize, as Chika said, that we are part of the Rahimimisu, we're part of a continuum, and that everything that we're doing now is a result of all the things that we have done previously, and it frames all the things that we will ever do in the future. That's an awesome amount of power and responsibility. And when you can begin to wake up every morning and accept that responsibility, right? And as Chika said, chart out your day so that there are no wasted moments. And you're building, you're creating with every single breath that you make, then you'll find that the universe aligns itself to you. And let me share this, one of my favorite sayings, and then I'll turn it back to you. There's a saying that I read back in 1977 that has been my modality for living. It says that a mind that is hopeful, confident, courageous, determined on its set purpose, and keeping itself to that purpose, attracts to itself out of the universe things and powers that are favorable to that purpose. When I go to the Nile Valley and see these ruins, I see people who knew that and knew how to do it, right? And if they did it, it means that we can do it. We just have to begin to cultivate the means to reconnect with that stream of consciousness and then be responsible for what we bring into existence.
Brother Taki, can I add something to that?
Sure.
It was just real quickly, there's something that Tony said when he started talking about the different stars and things of that nature. It reminded me, and he made it so clear and very practical. I just wanted to add this to it. Bunseki Fukiao has written about this, that in the Bakongo tradition, they say every child, and thus every person, is a rising sun and a radiating center of light. So Tony is spitting all these facts about astronomy and different stars and things, but this is directly related to our lives. Every child, and thus every person, is a rising sun and a radiating center of light. And if a sun has a solar system, then this instructs us as parents.
Yeah.
What planets are going to be in your solar system? What people are you going to place in your child's life? What people are you going to allow access to your life? Because it's been said everybody doesn't deserve a front row seat in your life. But we were very intentional that our sons would have access and encounters of the intellectual knowledge that Tony has. And if that meant that we had to go up to Maryland to get it, then that's what we did. If that meant that we had to go down to Alabama when we found out that he was doing a lecture at Tuskegee University, we went down there and met him there because we wanted that person and that knowledge in our solar system. Who is the spiritual guide in the solar system of your life and in the life of your children? Who is the health practitioner that's going to give you right guidance in these challenging times? So you structure, if you're a rising sun and a radiating center of light, the question then becomes, who will be in your solar system and who will you allow in there and who will you very intentionally place there? When we look back into the tomb of Antef, we find the oldest word in human history for teaching and learning, and that word is Seba. And it has three primary meanings: teach, door, and star. And that, along with other ancient research, tells us that the African philosophy of education is that the teacher opens the door to the universe so that the student may shine like a star. This connection to the cosmos, this connection to the universe is inescapable when you study African sacred science and the knowledge of our ancestors.
Amen, brother.
Yes, sir. Family, open the door. You got the teachers teaching. Open the door. Definitely share, like the video. Extremely powerful discussion. Far beyond my wildest imagination. Only way we get this information out is if we do the right thing and we share the video. Definitely want to support these brothers. Also, you essentially took my next question. Speaking about, we had this tremendous spiritual discussion. A lot of it's been intuitive. With that, I want to ask you, brothers, if you wouldn't mind taking a couple questions from the audience. If you have some more time, a few more minutes.
Sure. Okie doke.
Dope. All right. So let's see what type of questions we have. If anyone has any questions, you have the opportunity. Just specify who you'd like the question addressed to.
I saw that Sister Amma had a question about why you would place the altar in the west. And so the reason you would place the altar in the west is the sun sets in the west. Amen sets in the west. The ancestors travel to the beautiful west. So the west is where the process of ancestorhood begins. So you want to set up your altar in a place where the ancestors dwell and then go and appeal to them. Real simple process, and there's nothing spooky about it. If you're feeling uncomfortable, just start with someone close to your heart who you know and love, and someone who you know would never cause you any harm. And just think about that person regularly and what they would want you to be doing with your life, and invite that person to be a part of your consciousness, and you'll begin that very important walk.
Thank you, Professor Browder. Dr. Chika, you talk a lot about mastering our melanin. What does that mean?
When we talk about mastering our melanin, I was first exposed, interestingly enough, to melanin science through the melanin conferences that Tony used to host through the Institute of Karma Guidance. So somehow I got a hold of those tapes back in the early 90s, and now I listen to them over and over and over. But another dear friend of mine is Dr. Tim Moore. Dr. Tim Moore is one of our great melanin scholars, and he also happens to be the chair of the Department of Psychology at Clark Atlanta University. And he's written several books dealing with melanin science. So one of them is called The Science of Melanin. Another one is called Dark Matters and Dark Secrets. And then just last year, he came out with Pigment Power. So melanin science is very, very important when you understand that the skin is the largest organ in the body. And also when you understand that melanin is a superconductor, and that there's certain things that we can do to benefit from the science that has been woven into our body based on the way that we eat, based on the way that we breathe, and based on the way that we live our lives. So melanin, studying about melanin is very, very important to help us understand how we can maximize our melanin. And here's an interesting thing about it. One of the things that Dr. Tim Moore told me, he would be an outstanding guest for this program as well. But as a melanin scholar, he travels literally all over the world to these different melanin conferences. And he said, Brother Chika, we're not there. I said, what do you mean we're not there? He said, I mean, I'm the only Black person in the room. Other people are studying us more than we are studying ourselves. This takes me back to a story that Dr. Richard King tells. Dr. Richard King was an African-centered psychiatrist who wrote The African Origins of Biological Psychiatry, where he was delving deep into the ancient Kemetic texts. When he was in medical school at the University of San Francisco, he said he received some ancestral impulses to begin studying about the pineal gland. He asked one of his medical professors about the significance of the pineal gland. His professor told him, there's nothing special about the pineal gland. It's a vestigial organ, meaning it doesn't do anything, as if the creator would create something that doesn't do anything. But he said it's like the appendix. It doesn't do anything, as if the appendix doesn't do anything. So when he started doing his own research, he comes to find out that the professor who told him that the pineal gland doesn't do anything is a major scholar in the field and has published all kinds of research on the pineal gland. But he's keeping that knowledge from the young initiate who comes ready to learn, who comes ready to go through this transformation. So you'd be amazed at the great lengths people will go through to keep this from us. So I really want to encourage others to do more studies about our melanin. It's more than just skin color. We know that there's melanin in the iris of the eye. We know that there's melanin in the inner ear that allows us to hear things in ways that others don't hear it. That allows us to move in ways that others can't move. And so there's so much to it. And I'll leave with this last part because we know that the pineal gland secretes a substance called melatonin that is responsible for beginning to bathe the brain and is responsible for higher levels of spiritual awareness. And the secretion of melatonin happens typically between 12 midnight and around 6 a.m. And this is why that midnight hour time is so important when we typically begin to have dreams and see visions and different things of that nature. Earlier, we talked about the importance of meditation, pre-paving our day, and visualizing how we would like for our life to be. We know that our physical eyes have photoreceptors. They're called rods and cones that capture the light and produce the image that we see. Well, guess what? The brain has photoreceptors as well that allows us to have inner vision. All of this is mediated by light and melanin. And so all of these things are interconnected, and there's so much more that I could say about it, but I'll leave it at that. And I'm sure there's some things that I'm leaving out, but I hope that kind of gives some people some, a place to go with this. Again, I highly recommend Dr. Tim Moore's book, The Science of Melanin, or Dark Matters, Dark Secrets, or his most recent book, Pigment Power.
Thank you for that. Powerful. Professor Browder, the African social structures, how are they connected, the ancient African social structures, particularly Lorna now, when you think about them, how they connected to African sacred science and the power of the African mind?
Well, one of the things that I'm truly beginning to understand now is the cultural unity that existed among African people throughout the entire length of the Nile Valley, 4,100 miles, right? And that there are Africans in Uganda, there are Africans in Kenya, there are Africans in Ethiopia that I feel have a lot of the knowledge that we're looking for right now, information that is no longer available in Kemet probably still exists in Southern Africa. And so that's information that I think could be helpful to us to connect the dots. So it's important for me right now that we begin to, those of us who are listening to HAPI Talks and are motivated by what you're hearing, I would ask that if you are so moved that you begin to look at traveling to the Upper Nile and looking for people, information that can help us connect the dots. I'm kind of at a loss. I just know that I just feel this. I'm going to go with the gut feeling now for a minute. Step out of character for a minute. I feel as though we're standing on the precipice of something truly big that is happening. That is about to happen, because everything is moving towards something. I am a very strong proponent of karma, cause and effect. And that we create our reality. And if we look at the nature of the world in which we've been living, we see that the environment has been destroyed. We see, pollution. We see people aggressing against other people. So something major is about to happen. It's been set in motion. Or as Malcolm said, the chickens are coming home to roost. You can feel it. It's in the air. So I think what's going to be so critical for us as we move forward, and I'm kind of doing what Chika was talking about earlier. I'm kind of looking 10 years down the road, 50 years down the road, 100 years down the road, looking at the bigger picture. And there's some information that we are going to need to avail ourselves of in order to be able to thrive in this world that's rapidly changing. And in order to get that information, we're going to need people who have the courage to travel, people who are unafraid of reading and studying and learning new skills and connecting with those elders who are looking for young people to pour their knowledge into, so that this information can be preserved for future generations. We're in that right now. And so I don't want folk listening to the HAPI Talks to just be comfortable listening and talking about how great the information was. No, we've got to be doing something. Everybody needs to be doing something. Everybody is here to do something that is going to add value to your life, to your family, to your community. And I think it's important that we start thinking about that and talking about that more regularly, so that we can begin to show those who are looking for a way that there are ways for us to move forward, to get out of this mess that others have created. But there are ways that we can solve these problems. We are problem solvers. We have been solving problems for thousands of years. That's what we do better than anybody else, right? So we are here living at this particular point in time because there is something that we can do that will change the future for all generations. And I want more folk to be involved in that process and not just sit back on the sidelines while you're watching others do it. Everybody is here for a purpose. So I want folks to begin to step up and get serious and find something that you can do. Find something that inspires you and make your contribution to our people. This is what time it is. This is the only thing that really matters at this particular point in time.
Make your contribution. Dua. Thank you for that. Dr. Akua, you often say vision is the ability to see beyond your circumstances. Talk to us about why that's so important to trying to find our divine purpose.
Well, I know I've been in a lot of situations in life where it was difficult to see beyond what I was experiencing. I wanted to have a better life. I wanted more for my family and more for our people. And so that's what kind of, made me come up with that saying, because I began to realize that the more I began to visualize things and prepave my day, it helped me to actualize the things that I desired in life. And then as I began to read more and study more, I found out that this was actually an ancient, technique and something that's used quite a bit. So that's when I became increasingly intentional about it and began teaching it to other people. I call it the law of magnetic mind, that the mind is a magnet and attracts to it that which is of similar substance. Again, the mind is a magnet and attracts to it that which is of similar substance. So if that which I'm desiring is more love, more joy, more peace, more abundance, and things of that nature, and these are the things I visualize, but not just visualize, but feel the feelings of what it would be as I have those things in my life, then I become very, very attractive to begin to welcome those things into my life. Sometimes it happens in an instant. Other times it may take days, months, weeks, or years. But the bottom line is we are a product of our own envisioning. We are a product of our own thoughts and behaviors. And that's part of what it means to be created in the image and the likeness of the Most High, is to begin to take hold of that power to create the life that we desire to lead.
Powerful. Just real quick, if you brothers have any other closing remarks, anything you'd like to add to the discussion? Let's start with you, Professor Browder.
Well, I would just say, listen, we are living in uncharted times. I'll be 70 in July, right? And I've seen a lot in my life, but I can say with certainty that I've never seen things as troubling in this society as I have seen them within the last decade or so. We have to begin to prepare ourselves for what's coming. And preparation means know yourself, connect with family. Some of us have family members we haven't spoken to in years because of something so stupid we don't even remember what it was. But in time of COVID, where people are dropping like flies and you never know who's going next, you realize how truly precious life is. And it is a gift that we are blessed to have. And it's a gift that cannot or should not be wasted because we're indecisive, because we are fearful. A mind that is hopeful, confident, courageous, determined on its set purpose and keeping itself to that purpose attracts to itself out of the universe things and powers that are favorable to that purpose. That's what our ancestors have known, and it's no secret. It's no secret. So what you think, you manifest. So begin your day, as Chika has already laid out a roadmap for us, begin your day thinking about your day, conceiving the things that you want to happen, and then begin to use this latent power within you to help bring them into manifestation. Love somebody, be kind to somebody, say a kind word to someone. You know, there's always going to be folk who will sit on the sidelines and snipe and this and that. Disregard those people because they are lost souls. And the more energy you give them, the more you will become like them. Just leave them to their own devices and continue to do those things that you know will hold you in high regard in the eyes of your ancestors and those that really matter to you. And just do your best. That's what we're here for, to do our best. And anything less is unacceptable.
We're here to do our best. Anything less is unacceptable. Peace. Powerful. Dr. Akua.
Sure. Just two quick proverbs to consider. The first one says, if you desire to move mountains tomorrow, you must first begin by moving small stones today. And so that goes back to being very intentional about what we do on a daily basis and mastering the day. And then lastly, I don't even know if this last quote is true or not, but it definitely makes you think about your thoughts and behavior. And it simply says, the world is equally divided between good and evil. Your next act will tilt the scales.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. Well, thank you, brothers, for coming on the show. I appreciate you. Love and respect tremendously. You give me just a minute or so. I'm going to close out the show, hang out backstage. I'd love to come talk to you guys back there. With that being said, definitely want to give a shout out to Tamika Murphy for creating the legacy. I see you have your family working with you. It's doing a great job. Definitely shout out to you. All those for your support and love and the super chats and the cash apps. Thank you so much. And just tune in for our next Happy Talks. We'll be announcing that soon. We also have, like I said, several things for purchase. Got the new t-shirts here. Our summer t-shirts, summer colors. Definitely go get one. Help support the program, ongoing Happy movement. All those in the Happy movement, definitely give a shout out to you. More importantly, if you haven't seen the film, take this opportunity to go get a copy. You can get a digital copy or the DVD, both available on our website. You will not be disappointed. The film is one of a kind. I know you've seen a lot of similar documentaries. HAPI is one of a kind. For all those who have not seen it, take this opportunity to do so. Also important, some of our videos have a tremendous amount of exposure and views. Those sitting on the sidelines, take this opportunity to subscribe to us on YouTube and on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Definitely want to help get the numbers up. YouTube, we're closing in on 20,000. Help us get to that mark. Definitely very important. With that being said, I want to give a shout out to all those involved, all those in the background. Obviously, Sister Felicia, she's here. She's always here, always present. Excuse me. Sanette B and people just involved in the Happy movement and things that we're doing. So without any further ado, I want to say peace and Black power. And to our next time, peace.
I don't know what we can talk about in this nation without talking about white superiority, honestly.
Who defines the meaning of God also defines the relationship between economy and God.
African Americans spent $1.3 trillion last year, making us the 16th wealthiest nation in the world. Why have we not turned those riches into wealth to develop our community?